It's only Thursday, and already this week, President Trump has declared he's withdrawing troops from Syria and sending the National Guard to the U.S. border with Mexico. Plus, he's waged verbal war on Amazon and China and immigrants. And we've learned the special prosecutor in the Russia probe is preparing a report all about Trump's conduct. There's more, but we only have 30 minutes. And did I mention it's only Thursday? I'm Molly Roberts, joined by Washington Post opinion columnists Dana Milbank, Karen Tumulty, and Ruth Marcus. If you have questions or comments, send them in and make them good, and I'll try to get them in the mix. First up, the National Guard has a new assignment: defend the southwestern border. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said Wednesday that Trump has directed the troops to help Customs and Border Protection with what exactly?
While plans are being finalized, it's our expectation that the National Guard will deploy personnel in support of CBP's border security mission. It will take time to have the details in place, but we are beginning today and we are moving quickly. We are anxious to have the support. I have spoken with all of the governors and will be continuing these conversations. It is very encouraging that some of them have already taken dramatic steps in their own states to confront illegal immigration and to strengthen that border security to prevent the criminal activity and the inflow of drugs.
Plans to deploy the Guardsmen come after Trump spent days warning of the big caravan heading to our weak laws border. So guys, what the heck is going on here? I guess let's start with the question of this weak laws border and exactly where we are on border security right now. Is Trump right that there's this huge threat that needs Guardsmen to defend?
So I want to start with plans are being finalized, which seems to me to be, that should be the title of the memoir of like every Trump cabinet secretary. He's sprung this on us and
Yep.
Details to come. So as plans are finalized, this is, I understand that we live in a universe of alternative facts, but the actual facts, as I understand them, are that there are fewer people trying to illegally cross the weak border than there ever have been before. So why we need to send troops to fortify that border against the hordes that aren't coming is a little bit of a mystery to me.
Well, I think the answer is in the tweet itself, and really what he's now starting to do is there's a whole new front in the nickname business here, because usually nicknames are given to people, but now there's a nickname war on the border. We have the weak law. We have the weak. It is a crooked border in parts. It's a weak laws border, and it's also cash cow NAFTA. So you can see him going after other things that way. And we also have Cheatin' Obama came out in a related
What do you think that was about?
tweet to this. Well, you see, my theory, which is not related to the crooked border, is that there was a line in one gossip sheet in Hollywood that said Obama was having an affair. So the natural thing for Trump to do after Stormy Daniels and all this other voluminous evidence is to pick out something like that and blame the trait that he's been blamed with on his opponent.
I love
which always
that
happens.
theory.
So I think we should run with it.
Yeah.
We just did. We
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
broadcast
Oh,
that.
whoops.
No, we're live.
I think, though, that what this all goes back to, because we also had him asserting that all these people in this caravan are coming here to take advantage of DACA, which, of course, they would not be eligible to
Quite a
take
disappointment.
I think this all goes back to the omnibus spending bill that the president signed, that he wanted a lot of money for his big, beautiful wall. He got almost no money for his big, beautiful wall. He got no deal on DACA, and so he's sort of trying to gin up an atmosphere of crisis.
Right, whip up a trade war, and whip up a crisis with a caravan, which apparently was dispersed on a football field. Like, how many of them could there have been?
Don't you love the image of caravan? Like, I just see camels.
Well, clearly Fox
Yeah.
and Friends love the image of caravan, and that's
yeah.
where Trump got it from and what got him so excited about it. The numbers are, it appears to be, it was 1971 was the last time that the arrests at the border, the attempted crossings were lower than they are now. And Trump even tweeted this morning. He said, an unacceptable 46-year low, which, what? He's arguing against me. I think he's a little confused, but What's been interesting after all these tweets is that it seems that besides just the spectacle of sending the National Guard there and looking very strong, there has been some talk of changes in policy too, right? The idea is to change asylum laws. So what do we see going forward besides him doing this as a show of strength? Do we see any big changes in policy
Well,
coming?
there's talk of, for instance, giving immigration judges quotas of people to deport, which is not exactly the way justice is supposed to work.
Just assembly line justice.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the
Like
lawyer on this panel, but
Lucy on the candy
candy.
assembly line and those illegal immigrants as fast as she can.
Okay. Well, we have a lot to get through, so I think we'll move on. We have another major defense announcement this week. President Trump has instructed U.S. military leaders to withdraw troops from Syria within months. The fight against the Islamic State, he said at a news conference on Tuesday, has gone so well that the United States is in a fine position to call it quits.
I want to get out. I want to bring our troops back home. I want to start rebuilding our nation. We will have, as of 3 months ago, $7 trillion in the Middle East over the last 17 years. We have nothing except death and destruction. It's a horrible thing. So it's time. It's time. We were very successful against ISIS. We'll be successful against anybody militarily. But sometimes it's time to come back home.
Maybe we're skeptical of Trump's foreign policy chops, but we're hoping that his time in office has given him a better handle on Syria than his 2016 presidential rival, Gary Johnson.
What would you do if you were elected about Aleppo?
About.
Aleppo.
And what is Aleppo?
You're kidding.
No.
Seriously, though, about 2,000 U.S. troops are on the ground in Syria, supporting Kurdish and Arab militias in the fight against the Islamic State. So what would their withdrawal mean for the region? Is this all about what's going to happen with the fight against ISIS now? Is it about a domino Middle East effect? What are we going to see?
Well, first it's the question of is it a withdrawal or not? Now,
Right.
literally at the moment the president was making this announcement, his top general from the region who happened to be in town was saying the opposite.
Plans are being finalized,
just
as
a
you
few ways.
said, right?
And plans are now very hastily being finalized to do whatever the president said yesterday, although that may not be what he says tomorrow. But I don't often say this, but this is a success that has happened under the Trump administration. Islamic State has been decimated now. It comes at the price of giving Russia and Iran a great deal of control in Syria, and an American pullout would worsen both of those two things. But that is a legitimate policy option.
And I was struck by something the president said right after that, which is that we would only keep troops in Saudi Arabia if they paid for it, which suggests that the, greatest military on earth has now become a mercenary force. And the idea
Well,
that
aren't you tired of getting ripped off?
but the idea that we would, put the lives of American men and American women at risk based on whether somebody is willing to pay for them to be in, and that would drive our military
This
policy.
after an unprecedented increase in military spending.
Well, you got to pay for that parade somehow.
I think this is one of those situations, as we've discovered, there's always a Trump tweet for something. And I believe if one looked back in the Trump Twitter archive, one would find tweets of him criticizing his predecessor. What's his name? Cheatin', thank you. Cheatin', no, I was stuck on crooked in my brain. Cheatin' Obama for setting arbitrary dates about pullouts. This is, every president's instinct is get me out of here, because this is wherever here is, because this is not an easily winnable situation. Most presidents have found that their advisors say, well, we get your instinct, Mr. President, but it's going to be worse if you pull out. Plans are being finalized, but it will be interesting to see who ends up winning that
And now
argument.
there isn't a Tillerson, there isn't a McMaster to say, hold on, sir, we still have we still have Mad Dog, and that is
But
perhaps the only grown-up in the
not
room.
just Mad Dog, we have new Mad Dog coming in.
Madder Dog.
Yes, very nice. I knew there was a joke in there somewhere. Who is John Bolton, the new National Security Advisor, who differs from the president in his continuing belief that we were correct to go to war in Iraq. And so who one would presume, since he kind of likes being in the middle of military conflict, Mr. didn't go to Vietnam, John Bolton, would be reluctant to remove troops. So watch that space.
They will be needed to occupy North Korea.
And on Twitter,
After the bombing.
Right.
Yeah.
on Twitter, one of our viewers is chiming into Russell Nassiri says, "What's going on with Trump? Syria is given to Russia for what reason?" So again, playing into the domino effect that this could have here. But I think you're right. This does mesh with Trump's general, we're going to rebuild the country at home, is one of the things that he's saying. We're focusing on the United States. We're not thinking about anybody else, which moves us on to our next topic. Before we get to the Russia investigation, as we always inevitably do, I want a rapid-fire response from you, and really make it rapid, to Trump's attacks on Amazon and China this week. His administration slapped Chinese electronics, aerospace, and machinery products with $50 billion in penalties. It's punishment for the alleged theft of American tech innovations. In the same week, Trump lashed out, again, at Amazon, a leading source of American tech innovations. In a tweet Tuesday, Trump said Amazon is costing the United States Post Office massive amounts of money for being their delivery boy. Amazon should pay these costs, plus, and not have them borne by the American taxpayer, many billions of dollars. FYI, viewers, Amazon's chief executive, Jeff Bezos, also owns the Washington Post.
Coincidentally.
Coincidentally. So we will start with China. Trump says this is not a trade war. China, though, reciprocated today with tariffs on United States products. So who will be the casualties here?
Trump voters in all sorts of soybean and other growing states who are going to find their markets reduced.
I think that is about right. So do we see this as a big political problem for him going forward? What is he gaining by starting this war?
You know, I am wondering if what we're going to end up seeing here is Donald Trump once again threatening something and not following through on it, because I think that the drops in the stock market and the worries of a lot of people, a lot of Republicans, that this could dampen the one thing they have going for them in this midterm election season, which is the strong economy, could, sort of force him to pull back.
We
on
heard
it.
a suggestion along those lines from the Senate Majority Leader this week, who was expressing his, who, as you know, has been incredibly forceful in his opposition to Trump and just completely unrestrained, that Mitch McConnell, but who did
very
express
brave.
his concern about these tariffs.
I'm disappointed to hear that it may not be a trade war, because the president said trade wars are good and easy to win. So I was enthusiastic about it when he had said that. It does not appear to have frightened the markets to the extent it did earlier. May be different in the soybean industry, which Ruth follows very closely.
Avidly.
But it does sound like this was a case of the president wanting to make some noise, and he did. Unfortunately, you can't really be sure what China's going to do on the other side, so this is really out of our hands.
And are we no longer worried about the tariffs that Trump was saying at first he was going to impose on absolutely everybody? Are we thinking now it's pretty much going to be a battle with China and we're not so concerned about our allies? Of course, he just went after NAFTA in his Mexico tweets, so.
Details are being finalized.
Details are being finalized, but if it's like the steel case, there was a lot of noise, and then when it actually came to being put out there, it was
That
much
was
smaller.
after that election in Pennsylvania.
It might have
yeah.
had something to do with that.
So to Amazon, we have on Facebook a viewer comment from Michael Ben Yehuda. I think we've seen Michael before, so thank you, Michael, for being a dedicated viewer. Michael asks, can Amazon sue? Deliberate lies cost stockholders many millions. Can Amazon sue?
I don't know if Amazon can sue, and none of us here speak for Amazon, but I can
Certainly
say
not.
I would be rather astonished if Amazon did sue.
Yes.
I think investors in Amazon could conceivably sue. But there's a long line of people suing the president, and I mean, you're behind Stormy, you're behind a whole bunch of others. So,
Yes.
I believe the president, though, let's just make clear, those tweets are filled with falsehood after falsehood.
Yes.
Not to mention the classic misspellings,
And
but
strange capitalization.
and bizarre capitalization. I saw the word Germanic used about it the other day. I like that one because he, it does come from German stock. I've lost my train of thought.
Oh, sorry.
But we don't actually want to live in a world where people are sued for tweets, even false tweets. We want to live in a world like the one that the Washington Post inhabits, where there's lots of vibrant disagreement and the First Amendment protects all of us.
Right.
Just saying.
Yes, the falsehoods on the tweets. The tweet is kind of baffling. Amazon should pay these costs to the post office. So I guess the idea there is that Amazon Prime free shipping means Amazon gets to ship free through the post office, not that Amazon is paying the additional costs, is it?
Amazon made a deal with the post office. It's paying the post office. The deal, as I understand it, the post office should be thanking Amazon for its business. You're welcome.
I mean, the post
Not
office,
us. Just
post
joking.
office has
Just
done
joke.
quite an excellent job of losing money on its own long before it had this deal
but
with
Amazon is helping
Yeah, no, well, no, and I
the
mean,
bottom line of the post
they are
office.
probably helping the bottom. I feel bad about this, however, even though Amazon does not control the Washington Post, and I have tried to pay the postal delivery service $1.47 each time I receive a package. They've been puzzled.
We have another comment from Michael looping back to the tariffs saying farmers will ask for price supports, watch for it. I think the tariffs will never happen. Also, we want to remind viewers that this is an opinion show with opinion writers. There have been some questions about why we're giving opinions. That is why. There's not much
They
more
pay
to
us
it than
for
that. Right, exactly. The attacks on Amazon did rattle the stock market, so there might be concern about the long-term impact there. But I guess we're talking about why is Trump doing this, attacking Amazon? Do we have any sense of that?
Well, I mean,
We don't wanna go
I
there.
was just thinking that question could precede any of these actions, and
Right. Yeah, keep going.
often it's not known perhaps by the president himself why he's doing it. Why did he do it in this particular case? He's very irritated by the coverage he's been receiving from this newspaper, and he sees a point of leverage in dealing with the person who owns this newspaper, who also happens to be the
And he's
founder.
not one known for making fine
Right.
distinctions between the ownership of Amazon and the ownership of the Washington
Which is
Post.
odd because usually he's very nuanced
Usually he
in his
is.
thinking.
All right, we will move on to the Russia probe. Our colleagues on the news side, as we said, we here are on the opinion side, reported this week that Special Counsel Robert Mueller informed President Trump's attorneys last month that the president is a subject of the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election, but not a criminal target, at least not right now. Ruth, you're the lawyer among us. What does this mean that he is a subject but not a target?
So we don't know precisely what it means. It is not terrible news for the president because to be the target would be terrible news, but it is not necessarily great news for the president. It's not necessarily great news for a couple different reasons. A subject can turn into a target at any moment, especially if said subject were to, say, wander into the grand jury and say falsehoods under oath. He may simply be a subject because, and I don't think this is the likely explanation, because Special Counsel Bob Mueller has concluded that the president, which is the view of the Justice Department, a sitting president cannot be indicted, so therefore would never be a target. I think that's a kind of too cute by half theory and not the game that Mueller's playing. I think what this means, and probably the more important part of the Washington Post newsroom report, is that Mueller was never likely to be indicting the president for all sorts of reasons. However, he is planning to write a report,
Right.
probably a series of reports. The first of those reports will likely center on the question of potential obstruction and obstructive actions. If that report would go to, if he is still Deputy Attorney General at the time, Rod Rosenstein, it would take some additional work to get that made public, but the fact that that is kind of looming out there as a big thundercloud for the president is, to me, a really big deal.
So, yeah, I guess it is interesting to talk a little bit more about what we think is going to happen in the end here. So, from you, Karen and Dana, if Mueller writes this report, if he determines that he can't bring a criminal charge against the president, he writes this report, he gives it to Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein determines whether this report gets to Congress. Do we,
Or the public.
Or exactly, or the public, right? Because it would be, you can tell me, Ruth, it would be up to Rosenstein to determine how widely it was released, or it would be up to Congress then to vote on how widely to release it.
It could be either, but
Or
you
leaked.
would also, nothing ever leaks here in Washington. To the extent that the report contains grand jury information, the court here in the District of Columbia would need to be involved in allowing the release of the grand jury information. To the extent that the report contains classified information, the intelligence community would need to be involved in that. But I think the existence of a report, to me, means the likelihood that that at least significant parts of said report will become public, and that is going to be awfully interesting.
With Devin Nunes's objections.
He will be unmasked.
But ultimately, you know, there is one place where Trump's fate would be decided, and that is by the Congress, and whether they decide that there is something in said report that you know, comprises a impeachable offense.
Right.
There's also the big question of who else gets indicted and whether these are people who are particularly close to the president. And that is another big question hanging over this whole investigation.
Which others? How many of them are there? And I mean,
And who they're related to.
Who they
Or married to.
what their
Yeah.
last names might be.
Yeah.
But it's inconceivable to me that there would be a report that would not be presented to the Congress, at least in some form. I can't see. As I recall, Ken Starr made his report directly to the Congress as a slightly different circumstance.
He was operating under a different circumstance
Right.
and a specific statute, but yes.
It would be very hard, I think, to
once
avoid
a report
that.
is written, a report will find its way, I think, into public hands. There was another interesting thing that happened on the Russia probe this week also that's worth mentioning, which is we saw an unsealed piece of an authorization to Mueller to look not only into Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman's dealings with Ukraine, and as we know, he's been indicted for money laundering and a whole bunch of related offenses. But the Trump defense of Manafort has always been collusion, no collusion. What are you talking about? Right. Collusion. He was only with my campaign for a short time, and in any case, the stuff that he has been charged with or is being accused of has nothing to do with the campaign. What we now know is this tantalizing piece of a redacted authorization from Rosenstein giving Mueller explicit authorization to look into allegations that Manafort, as campaign chairman, colluded with Russian agents to affect the election. That seems to me like kind of a big deal. We don't know what those allegations are. We don't know what has been proven or disproven, but you can't say there's no evidence of any collusion. He has been authorized to look into exactly that.
And there's also that potential vehicle which surfaced again this week because of the guy I call the Lying Dutchman, who was sentenced this week. But we know through him, perhaps they know through other sources, that that Gates, Rick Gates, Manafort's colleague, and on the Trump campaign and in business, through another associate of theirs who is tied to Russian intelligence, had some communication during the campaign. So there's a vehicle for that.
For a campaign that didn't collude with Russians, and we don't know that they did, they had an awful lot of contact with them.
Incidental.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Lying Dutchman, so Trump is not the only one with the fun nicknames.
No, there are many such
TM
things
Dana Milbank.
in the House of Orange.
So I know that you all wanted to talk about something that we didn't initially have on the agenda, but we will bring it in. Scott Pruitt. So, yeah, look at that face. You want to tell us what's going on with Scott Pruitt?
My favorite.
I haven't seen her so happy since she talked about soybeans.
My favorite line of the day was when Scott Pruitt said he was dumbfounded, but that anybody would be making a big deal of his housing arrangements. And I happen to know something about the cost of housing arrangements for rental property in downtown Washington, D.C. So if you could find me that deal of $50 a night, but just for the nights I need it, and just so happens to have been from a lobbyist who just so happens to have some business before my agency, and there's this other thing going on with the daughter, and did she pay for it? I mean, come on, Scott Pruitt. In any other administration, this guy would have been out the door weeks ago.
Well, and now we are hearing that the White House is getting annoyed with him, among other things.
Yeah.
They urged him not to go on Fox News, and he did. And so all of a sudden, these the statements as to how much confidence they have in him and his future, they're starting to get a lot fuzzier about that.
Do you think he's gone rogue a bit? Like, says it wasn't just Fox News, it was the Washington Times, Washington Examiner. I wonder if he's trying to appeal to the base and see if, because they love him for his politics and his policies anyway, if he can build up his support there, does that inoculate him?
In that sense, he's kind of the anti-Shulkin, right? David Shulkin, late lamented Veterans Administration Secretary. Was that just last week?
It was.
That was just only last Thursday.
So in that case, he had ethics foibles that he was also dumbfounded by, but he was also off the reservation ideologically in terms of the privatization of the Veterans Administration. Here, Pruitt is totally on the conservative Trump Republican bandwagon when it comes to dismantling regulations at EPA. So there's a tension between those two things. I'm with Karen's instinct, so what I think is your instinct. He can't survive this, even in Trump's administration.
Yeah, even if they want him to, because he is one of the most effective cabinet secretaries.
By the way, I would like one of those Pruitt raises that he gave to his staff and then didn't know about. That's a good defense.
All right, we're out of time, but not opinions. So check out WashingtonPost.com/opinions. And if you're worried your secrets will be spilled by a Facebook data breach, remember, it's only Thursday, so it could get better or worse. We'll find out next week. Plans are being finalized.